Somewhere in Mississippi this week, a woman opened a message on her phone that read like a threat straight out of a nightmare. A warning about a package arriving at her office, one that suggested it wouldn't arrive empty. She wasn't a suspect. She wasn't a witness accused of anything. She was a mother, connected to this case only because her son happened to be on a boat trip 2 weeks ago. And by the time this week ended, that message was serious enough that federal agents were involved. That's the world this case now exists inside. A federal agency has finally explained, in full and in writing, exactly why it's involved. A young woman at the center of one of this case's most confusing contradictions has spoken directly face-to-face with Nolan's own mother. And a friend of Nolan's has come forward again, this time helping to take apart 2 separate pieces of misinformation that had already spread to millions of people. All of that arriving in the same handful of days that this family has been quietly preparing to bury their son. We're going to go through each of these developments carefully tonight, sorting what's actually confirmed from what's still being repeated secondhand, because in a case like this, that distinction is everything. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to TrueCrime Vault and turn on notifications. This case is moving fast, and we're committed to only bringing you what's actually been verified through named sources, not screenshots and rumors. If that kind of careful coverage is something you value, subscribing means you won't miss the next update. And if tonight's video helps you actually understand where things stand, a like genuinely helps this reporting reach more people. Let's start with the FBI, because for weeks its involvement in this case had only ever been explained in fragments, a passing line here, an unconfirmed comment there. This week, the Bureau's Jackson field office finally released something more substantial, an actual on-the-record statement. According to that statement, the FBI has assisted with certain aspects of this investigation, using federal tools and partnerships that have proven valuable. But the Jackson County Sheriff's Office is leading, and will continue to lead, the investigation. The statement describes years of prior cooperation between Jackson County and federal authorities, and says the FBI has been supporting the case from day one, helping gather information in the effort to find answers for Nolan's family and the wider community. It closes by saying the Bureau remains ready to offer more support going forward if federal resources can help move things toward clarity for the people who loved him. Sheriff John Ledbetter has echoed that framing separately, telling a local outlet that FBI involvement isn't unusual here at all. Horn Island sits on federal land, and his office regularly works with federal partners as a matter of course. He's confirmed the FBI has been helping examine digital evidence collected in the case so far. It's worth paying attention to the tone of the FBI's statement, because tone matters here almost as much as content. This isn't a press release announcing some dramatic escalation. It reads closer to a reassurance. Careful, measured, clearly designed to lower the temperature around a question that had been generating real anxiety for days. Whoever approved that language seemed to understand that unexplained federal involvement was doing more to fuel speculation than actual silence ever could, and chose to address it directly instead of letting rumor keep filling that space. That matters, because plenty of speculation already had filled it. Some people online treated the FBI's presence as proof the case had quietly escalated into something far more serious than publicly acknowledged. Others treated it as evidence of the opposite. Federal agents supposedly stepping in to manage the story rather than investigate it. This statement doesn't really support either read. It confirms real, meaningful involvement, tools, partnerships, technical support, while explicitly stating that Jackson County remains the lead agency from start to finish. It's support, not takeover. That distinction is worth holding on to every time this part of the case comes up. Buried inside that same statement is the actual reason federal resources got pulled into this specific case at all. The FBI says its efforts have focused specifically on interstate threats received by individuals connected to this matter, and that this work is running in parallel with the ongoing local investigation, not merged into it. That's the clearest official confirmation yet of something worth understanding clearly. Federal involvement here isn't primarily about how Nolan died. It's about protecting people connected to this story from threats serious enough to cross state lines and become a federal matter in their own right. That phrase, interstate threats, is doing real work in that sentence, and it's worth unpacking briefly. For something to become a federal matter purely because it crosses state lines, It generally means someone in one state sent something threatening to someone in another, a message, a call, something using channels that inherently cross jurisdictional boundaries, the internet chief among them. That's precisely the kind of thing the FBI is built to handle, regardless of how large the underlying case actually is. It doesn't require Nolan's death itself to be treated as a federal matter. It only requires that somebody, somewhere, used interstate channels to threaten somebody else connected to this story. We do have at least one documented example of the kind of thing that's been happening. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, whose family includes one of the young men who was with Nolan on the trip, shared screenshots publicly of a threatening message she had personally received, a message referencing a package that would supposedly be delivered to her office in the coming days, worded in a way that implied it would explode. That's a real documented threat, shared directly by the person who received it. It's exactly the kind of thing serious enough to draw the attention this case has now gotten from federal authorities. Beyond that specific example, the FBI's statement itself doesn't specify what every threat actually said or exactly who received it. That's a deliberate kind of restraint, and it's worth understanding why. Naming specific victims or repeating specific threatening language in an official statement can itself cause additional harm, drawing more attention toward the very people an investigation is trying to protect, and potentially compromising any legal action that might eventually follow against whoever sent the threats. That caution, even if it leaves the public with fewer specifics than they might want, is usually a protective choice, not an attempt to minimize what actually happened. Treseston Shepard, one of Nolan's close friends who was on the island that day, has said publicly that he and others close to Nolan have also received threats. "It worries me for my friends. It worries me for my family," he told a reporter. That's not a secondhand claim about somebody else. That's someone directly connected to this story describing what's happening to the people around him in real time. It's worth pausing on what that actually does to an investigation like this one. Every witness in this story, every friend, every family member, every young woman who happened to spend a few minutes talking to Nolan on a beach, is watching all of this unfold in real time. If simply being named publicly, or coming forward with information, carries the risk of threats serious enough to draw federal attention, that creates a real chilling effect on anyone who might otherwise be willing to speak up. Protecting people from that kind of retaliation isn't just a matter of basic decency. It's directly tied to whether this investigation can actually get the full cooperation it needs to reach the truth. Now to the second major thread this week, and it's arguably the one that's shifted the shape of this case more than anything else recently. The young woman Nolan was speaking with in his final confirmed minutes on that beach, the person publicly referred to as Katie, has finally been heard from directly. Not through a relative's Facebook post, not through second-hand relaying, through an actual in-person meeting with Nolan's own mother. Christine Wansley has confirmed that she and Katie sat down together, face to face, and that what Katie told her did not fully match the account she's been hearing from other people close to the case. In Christine's own words, describing the situation earlier in an interview, what Katie said felt like a simple hey and bye. And that's not what she's been hearing elsewhere. She's called it another example of the inconsistencies surrounding her son's final hours. This represents a genuine shift from where things stood even a week earlier. Up until this point, everything attributed to Katie had arrived filtered through other people, first through a family friend relaying what she'd supposedly said, then through Katie's own mother, Gracie McCormick, posting on Facebook to try to correct rumors that had spiraled out of control online. Each of those accounts, however well-intentioned, was somebody else's memory of what Katie had said, rather than a direct conversation with the one person who actually has first-hand knowledge of Nolan's final confirmed words. A face-to-face meeting between Katie and Christine changes that. As far as the public record shows, this is the first time information about that conversation has traveled directly from the person who lived it to the person who needs to understand it most. It's worth walking through the actual content of that account carefully, because it's more specific and more limited than a lot of the broader public conversation around it has suggested. According to what's been publicly shared, Katie has been consistent from the beginning. She and Nolan met that day, spent time together, and eventually parted ways. Katie then got back on a boat with her own friends, separate from Nolan's group. She said she assumed, based on what he told her, that Nolan was heading back to rejoin his own friend's boat. Here's the detail that matters most, and it's easy to lose in the noise. Katie never actually saw Nolan get on that boat. She assumed it based on what he told her directly. She did not personally witness him rejoining his friends. That distinction is genuinely important. It means Katie's account isn't a direct eyewitness contradiction of what Nolan's friends have said, in the sense of her having seen one thing happen while they claim another happened. It's closer to this. Nolan told her his intention. Whether he actually followed through on that intention, in the time between that conversation and whatever came next, is something nobody, not Katie, not the friends who left, not the family, can currently confirm firsthand. That nuance matters, because a clean, direct contradiction between two witnesses makes for a much more dramatic story than an honest assumption does. But that's not quite what Katie's account actually is. She isn't claiming she watched Nolan walk away and physically board a boat. She's saying he told her a plan, and she had every reason at the time to believe he'd follow through on it. That's a meaningfully different kind of statement than a flat, direct eyewitness claim, and it deserves to be understood that way rather than flattened into a simple, he said, she said. It also reframes, at least partly, what actually still needs explaining. If Katie's account is accurate, the real mystery isn't necessarily whether Nolan wanted to leave the island. It's what happened in the gap between him stating that intention and whatever came afterward, a gap that, as of right now, nobody has been able to fully account for. This next part of tonight's update is about correcting the record, because two separate pieces of misinformation had already reached millions of people before either one was actually verified. And getting this right matters for how carefully everything else in this case should be read going forward. The first involved a photo showing Nolan at what looked like a pool party, which spread rapidly online with claims that it proved he had somehow made it off the island alive after July 4th, that his body had been placed back afterward, according to one especially dramatic post that circulated widely. Rolling Stone examined that claim directly.
Tristan Shepard confirmed the photo was actually taken more than a week earlier, on Saturday, June 27th, not on the night Nolan disappeared. A separate individual provided the outlet with metadata from that photo, along with other images taken the same night, which matched Shepard's account.
Shepard, who said he hadn't personally attended that particular party, explained that the friend group had been planning that gathering long before it ever happened, and that another friend had posted the photo as part of an unrelated photo dump days later, only deleting it once speculation about Nolan's death began attaching itself to the image. The second correction involves something we touched on in an earlier update. The viral video many people believed captured Nolan in an argument shortly before he disappeared. Shepard has now confirmed this directly and repeatedly in multiple interviews. The voice heard yelling on that recording is his own, not Nolan's. He said he doesn't believe Nolan even appears in the footage, and that the words being widely repeated online were his words, not Nolan's. Both of these corrections trace back to the exact same underlying pattern. In the space created by two still pending autopsies and a genuine lack of official answers, unverified claims have consistently moved faster than confirmed facts. That pattern is worth keeping in mind with every new detail in this case, including everything covered tonight. Confirmed information and secondhand claims can look nearly identical at first glance online. The only real way to tell them apart is to keep asking, every single time, exactly where a given detail actually came from. Stepping back to the official investigation itself. Following the July 15th meeting between Nolan's parents and Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath, Attorney Ben Crump confirmed the case will be handed to a grand jury once the underlying investigation concludes. That's standard procedure in this county for unnatural or suspicious deaths, and the district attorney's office has been explicit that a grand jury referral by itself doesn't confirm criminal activity. It's a routine step, not a verdict. Sheriff Ledbetter has said directly that the Wells family deserves a thorough and factual investigation, and that's what his office intends to deliver. Mississippi's Governor, Tate Reeves, addressed the case separately this week as well, saying he has confidence in the sheriff's office and that he personally hasn't seen any fact or piece of evidence suggesting foul play, while also saying he trusts local authorities to act appropriately if that ever changes. Not everyone watching this case has read that grand jury referral the same way. Former Mississippi Judge Carlos Moore has publicly raised his own concerns, questioning whether a referral alone should be mistaken for real progress, and saying he intends to keep watching this case closely as it moves forward. Other legal voices have pushed back on that skepticism, explaining that a grand jury referral is genuinely routine in cases like this one, not evidence of anything beyond standard process. Both of those perspectives are worth holding at the same time. Skepticism rooted in a case's specific history is reasonable to voice, and it's also true that this particular procedural step on its own doesn't confirm anything about guilt, innocence, or foul play. The real test isn't the referral itself. It's what actually happens once a grand jury reviews whatever evidence this investigation ultimately produces. One of the more concrete outcomes from that same meeting involves Nolan's phone specifically. Both sides have agreed to a joint, simultaneous inspection. The family's own experts, working alongside attorney Eric Hertz's team, examining the device at the same time as law enforcement's own examiners, so that everyone sees exactly the same data, extracted the same way, at the same moment. That kind of arrangement matters more than it might sound. When two separate parties examine digital evidence independently before agreeing on shared access, disputes tend to follow almost automatically. Questions about chain of custody, about whether anything was altered, about whose findings should actually be trusted. A joint simultaneous inspection avoids nearly all of that. For a case that has already generated real dispute over a single piece of digital evidence, that kind of procedural clarity is worth something on its own, regardless of what the phone ultimately reveals. Attorney Eric Hertz, who's leading the family's independent investigation, has said his team is now receiving somewhere between 50 and 100 calls a day from people who were on Horn Island themselves, or who know people who were. He's made a point worth remembering. Some of those callers, he said, aren't comfortable speaking directly to local law enforcement. His team's stated goal is connecting those people with investigators directly, rather than simply holding on to information themselves. There's a lot of narratives out there right now, Hertz said. Our job is to cut through all the noise and find the truth. All of this is unfolding in the days immediately before something this family has been quietly dreading. Nolan's funeral is set for Monday, July 20th at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, with visitation from 9 to 11 that morning and the service following immediately. Reverend Al Sharpton will officiate. Filmmaker Tyler Perry is covering the funeral costs. Following the service, the family will hold a celebration of Nolan's life at the Jackson County Fairgrounds, with coaches and former teammates from every level of his football career specifically invited. There's a detail worth including here that's gotten less attention than it probably deserves. The Mississippi Coast Coliseum and Convention Center had actually offered its venue to host the service, with its board voting to support the idea and staff preparing to accommodate over 1,000 guests. But once the actual cost of hosting an event that size at a public convention center was presented to the family, over $80,000, a figure the Coliseum's director said state law prevented them from reducing. The family ultimately chose to move forward with Center Point Church instead. The Coliseum responded with genuine grace, releasing a statement supporting the family's decision and saying its exterior would be lit blue throughout July in Nolan's honor. It's a small detail, but it says something worth noticing about the broader response to this case. Real institutions, not just individuals, quietly trying to support this family in whatever practical way they actually could. For anyone unable to attend in person, the Griot has announced it will live stream the entire service, both on its website and its YouTube channel, meaning people who have followed this story from anywhere in the country will be able to witness it as it happens. That's significant on its own. This won't be a private, quiet goodbye. It will be watched live by strangers across the country who have spent more than 2 weeks now following GPS data, disputed witness accounts, and viral videos, now invited to witness the actual human cost behind everything they've been following. Think about what that really means. A funeral is, in almost every ordinary circumstance, one of the most private and intimate rituals a family goes through. A closed circle of grief, shared only with the people who actually knew the person being buried. This funeral will be the opposite of that. And it's worth remembering, as coverage of Monday unfolds, that what's being live-streamed is a real funeral for a real 18-year-old, not simply the next chapter of an ongoing story. This is a family that has spent more than 2 weeks fighting publicly and relentlessly for real answers about how their son died, while simultaneously being forced to plan his funeral in full public view. On Monday, those two threads collide directly. The same press that has covered every twist in this investigation will be present for a service that Christine has described, in her own words, as meant to celebrate who Nolan actually was, rather than dwell in the suspicion and grief that have otherwise defined so much of this story. There's something worth sitting with about the timing of everything covered tonight, arriving in these final days before that funeral. The FBI's statement, Katie's account, the corrections to the pool photo and the viral video. All of it landed in the same stretch of days that this family will walk into that church still carrying, unresolved. They'll stand there celebrating their son's life while a grand jury referral sits somewhere in the future, while two separate autopsies remain unfinished, while a contradiction about his final conversation still isn't fully settled, and while, according to public reporting, a threat investigation continues quietly in the background. Grief in this case has never gotten the chance to exist entirely on its own, separate from everything else surrounding it. Monday won't change that, even as it gives this family a few hours specifically set aside to try. Pulling everything from tonight together, the FBI has now put its role in this case on the record in full, confirming real assistance with digital evidence and specifically with addressing interstate threats made against people connected to this story, while making clear that Jackson County remains firmly in the lead. Katie, the young woman at the center of one of this case's central contradictions, has finally spoken directly, meeting face-to-face with Nolan's own mother and offering an account that's more nuanced than a lot of the public conversation around it has suggested. An honest assumption about Nolan's intentions, not a first-hand confirmation of what actually happened afterward. And two separate pieces of viral misinformation, the pool party photo and the confrontation video, have both now been directly addressed by the same friend willing to put his name behind the correction, even at real personal cost. On Monday, Nolan Wells will be laid to rest in a service his family has deliberately built around celebration rather than sorrow, live-streamed for anyone who wants to be there without being there in person. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. 2 autopsies still haven't told his family how he died. A grand jury referral is waiting somewhere down the road. And in the meantime, this case keeps generating exactly the kind of pressure, threats, and public suspicion that everyone connected to it. His friends, a young woman who simply spoke with him on a beach, and now apparently an entire family, say they never expected to become targets of. It's worth remembering how much this single week actually clarified, even without resolving anything. 2 weeks ago, this case was dominated almost entirely by anonymous claims, viral clips stripped of context, and competing second-hand accounts. This week brought something different, an actual federal agency speaking on the record, a key witness finally heard from directly instead of through relatives, and named friends willing to put their own credibility on the line to correct the record. None of that adds up to an answer yet, but it's a meaningfully more documented case than it was even a few days ago, and in some real ways, a more honest one about what it still doesn't know. We'll stay on this story through Monday's funeral, through both autopsy results whenever they're finally released, and through whatever comes next as this investigation continues toward a grand jury. We'll bring you what's actually been confirmed, and not a moment before that. If you have verified information relevant to this case, both the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and the family's independent investigative team have asked that you come forward directly, rather than posting speculation online. Thank you for being here for this update. Subscribe to True Crime Vault so you don't miss what comes next, and we'll see you in the following video.